Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. Let's all take a deep breath. Tonight's conversation is an invitation to receive a new possibility, a new context for living in our world.
So Diamond and I have been working together, and we have had the Total Integration Institute and been married for almost 40 years. And we've had a passion for all of that time, and still do, for realizing our potential, but also helping our planet and globe realize its potential as well. And in doing that, we had a lot of amazing experiences. We've had incredible mentors. We've been so fortunate in our lives to have everything show up when we needed it. And I think it was partly out of how committed we were to experience whatever it was that was the truth, that we cared passionately about our own liberation, the liberation of others, about relieving and releasing ourselves from suffering and alleviating suffering wherever we went, and of understanding more about what we were doing here. Why were we here? What were we doing here? Why did we come here? And what was it that was our legacy to leave? What was it that we were here to do that we would, when we left this planet, that we would feel like, yeah, that was just amazing. We did it. We did what we came here to do. And at the same time that we all, some of what our motivation was just that we really passionately loved each other and wanted to have the relationship that we could have. We didn't want to spend any time in an experience that was less than honoring of our partner, because that's how we felt about each other and still do. And also that we felt that way about our children, that we wanted to raise our children in some way that allowed them the freedom to come into themselves of who they were, and much earlier, and not have to go through some of the things we went through to find out who we were, even though there was ways that I had a amazingly supportive environment for the times that I was raised in. So all of these experiences led us to having some very, very peak experiences in our life, very young, and of openings, of spiritual awakenings, of certain kinds of understandings, of both of us had a lot of creativity and a tremendous amount of energy. And so we were always looking for that next thing that felt real, of what's our path, what's our true path. And in doing that, we would have these amazing experiences, and then both of us would feel that, even before we met each other, that we wanted to live in that state every day, that it was not all right for us to have these peak experiences that were so amazing, where our hearts were open and where we felt so much love. And all of you have had those moments where you know it's important without a doubt. And sometimes it's when somebody dies, or sometimes it's when somebody was born, or something really significant happens, or you reach some kind of milestone in your life, or you have some kind of experience where you're sitting on top of a mountain, and there's something so beautiful before you that you're opened to that experience. And in that opening, that you know without a doubt what's important. Mm-hmm. Have any of you ever had that experience? Mm-hmm. Okay, and it's right then, it's like, wow, this is what life's about, right? This is the meaning of life. This is what every religion really talks about at the core, is this kind of love, this kind of compassion, this kind of passion, this kind of self-okayness with ourselves, this profound feeling that life works, that life is great, that life is something to be incredibly grateful for. And so we made decisions really early on that we wanted to live every day like that we didn't want to forget, that we didn't want to go back into old patterns, whether they were family patterns or cultural patterns or historical patterns, any kind of patterning that of knee-jerk reactions or of conditioned patterns that kept us from that experience. We felt like life was too valuable to be kept from that experience. And so we wanted to have that feeling of immediacy, a feeling of being on our edge, of just right there with what life was. and that we were willing to let go of our preconceptions. We were willing to let go of any kind of fixed form about how things were. And we were willing to be informed through our experience and through our own expansion and through our own depths of what was really so, knowing and accepting at a certain point that life was just an incredible mystery, that none of us really know the depth of the mystery of this universe or the multiverse. And now they're talking about multiverses giving birth to other multiverses and starting to talk about that in the sciences. So it's like we wanted to live with our whole beings open to that mystery, to that awe that you feel that sometimes when you're looking at the night sky and you feel, wow, that experience of being absolutely insignificant on one level, and on another level being so significant because you get to experience this. You get to be part of it. And so we had more and more experiences of where we started feeling like we were absolutely part of it, that maybe it was all inside of us even. That maybe the universe is inside of us rather than this idea we have of it being outside. Maybe the whole multiverse is inside of us. And that we realized that it didn't really matter, that it was inside, that it was outside, that it seemed like everything was everywhere and we were all connected, and that everything was awe-inspiring, and that it was all just this extraordinary mystery that was unfolding every moment, and that we kept on learning more and more and more amazing things, but the more we learned, the more we knew we didn't know, the more of a mystery it all was, and the more we had to accept that we were part of the mystery. At the same time, Diane and I both would have such essential experiences and the depth of our beings, that we also knew that there was something that informed all of this with an incredible kind of intelligence, a presence that was so real, and that felt like we could call it God, even though both of us were hesitant to do that because we were so willing to be in the unknown and to let go of even all of our religious ideas. Then I met a man who was an astrophysicist. He was an astronomer, and he was an astronomer for the Vatican. And he said, when I talk about God, I'm talking about the ground of all being, whatever that is that animates all this. I don't need to know everything about it. There's no way I could ever know about it, but that's it. And it was like, yeah, that's it. The ground of all being, whatever that source is, that primal essence that has birthed everything, that I honored it so much because I kept experiencing and running into it in my own body and my own cells and trees and flowers and plants and beauty and art and music and dance. And so many times I would just feel that feeling of something that connected everything, that animated everything from inside, that made everything alive, everything extraordinary. So that was when we started realizing that we had to, from the inside of ourselves, there was a passion that was really calling us to do something extraordinary and to decide to take a leap into creating a context that went beyond anything that either of us had ever known, that we didn't have to be limited to what anybody else had ever experienced. There's nothing that says you have to be who you were 10 minutes ago. There's no rules about that. There's no rules that says, well, you're not a person who can experience something that goes beyond what any human being has ever experienced before. There's no rules that say that you can't do that. So that's one thing I want to tell you tonight, is there are no rules that say you can't do that. You can be somebody who does that. You can be somebody who co-creates with that creative force in a way that you quantum leap humanity through your own neurology, through your own eyes, through your own heart, through your own being. You can be somebody who right then quantum leaps humanity. Okay, why not? So we started understanding this and started going, yeah, why not? So I remember somebody saying, well, how come you guys are so happy and in love? And we said, well, we just are. And they said, how long have you been together? And we said, well, at that point, about a year. And they said, oh, that's why. And we said, oh, aren't you going to be so glad when we're together for 30 years and people can't say that anymore? Because we knew that we just started, that we had just started. And now 40 years later, it does feel good to go, yeah, we've done it for 40 years. We've just kept growing it. We've just kept going someplace that was new with each other, with ourselves, with our family, with our creativity, with everything, with our work, that it's just kept being this amazing, expansive experience. And of course, in that expansiveness, there's moments of deep rest and profound being and profound letting go and profound simplicity and the profoundness of being in the kitchen with our dogs making breakfast. That's just as beautiful to me as anything. So that's what we've been doing, and we've been educating other people to what we find out, because we've been in a research project, a deep research project of what is the nature of a contextual shift. And we started realizing that what we experienced was that we were actually reality artists who were creating a new context, and that was our art, was creating a new context. And that what we cared about and were committed to was to create a new context that was sane and functional and expansive, mysterious, multidimensional, creative, beautiful, loving, tremendously loving, had incredible amounts of truth imbued in it, and was based on really the highest level of truth that we could grok at any given moment, and or even truth that we couldn't understand at the moment, but we were willing to. And also beauty, that we started realizing that beauty was an undervalued thing that was seen as a shallow quality, especially in American pop culture it is. But we started understanding that beauty was something deeper, that beauty was something that was when you were really with the truth, when you were with tremendous love flowing, that something beautiful would happen, that beauty would come and fill the space or come and fill us. And that kind of beauty radiated out from people. And it radiated into their creativity, into their music, into their art, into their them being educators or scientists or whatever they were, that there was a beauty that started happening. And I think we saw that beauty, in at times in people, great people throughout the time on earth. The incredible people that we admire aren't people who necessarily were successful at fulfilling their goal. Some of them never got there, but it was who they became and their willingness to leap into their bigger vision, to leap into what they were really being inspired to do, and that who they became over that. It's like a lot of people say, well, I admire Gandhi, and I go, what did Gandhi do? And they go, well, let's see. And they know maybe a few things he did, but they don't know a lot of things. And it's like, but what do they admire is the man he became in the process, right? So we figured we didn't have anything to lose, that by doing this process, that who we were becoming, we were liking better and better, and it was feeling more and more authentically us. That's what we knew. And that our life was feeling better, and that everything was getting healthier and more alive and more vital and more fun and more meaningful. That's what we knew. And so we kept with the process. So this idea of a contextual shift got stronger and stronger for us, and we started realizing that not only was it something that we needed and wanted, we started seeing that it was really a resolution for every single issue that was happening on the planet. That right now we're at such a critical point. For years, Diamond and I felt like we were futurists, and sometimes we would be hired as futurists because we were good at tuning in to leading edge possibilities. I think it was because where we were living from, where we were riding on the wave of life, that we could touch that. And so I've always known for some reason what colors were going to be popular in the next season, or something like that. So we have been good futurists for lots of things. So we were sometimes hired as futurists, or for Diamond seeing the leading edge system that would work for something, because he has very good visions of systems. So at one point, I remember being at a conference that we were speaking at, and somebody introducing us as people from the future who had come to the past to speak to us. And Diamond and I said, wow, we wonder how long it's going to be that we're from the future. This is going to be interesting. And lately, what's really been interesting this last year, we've said, wow, just as we're coming into our maturity, at the age that we are, we can see that we're not in the future anymore, that we're not futurist anymore, we're nowist. and that everything we have done for the last 40 years has prepared us for this time on the earth for doing what we're doing. And it's really a profound feeling for us to have that, to feel so poised for now in our work. So Diamond's going to talk to you a little bit more about context so that you understand what we're talking about here, of what a context is. And it can be known as a paradigm or a reality or a domain. Those are all words that we could use for context.
So let's take a look at this. One of the best ways to understand context is to look at the distinction between context and content. And how I'm going to do that, I'll share that with you, and join me with the visual, is we're going to start with a fruit bowl. So a fruit bowl would be the context that would then contain the fruit being the content. So context, content. Now, if you put perfectly good fruit into a moldy bowl, what happens to the fruit? What happens to the fruit is the fruit prematurely rots. So what's the problem? What's the issue? Is the issue the content or the context? Well, clearly the issue is the context, that if we didn't put the fruit in a moldy bowl, the fruit would have had its fulfilled life. So if we put fruit in a bowl that's clean and shiny and airy, the fruit will fulfill its potential. So then we look at that, take that same idea, and let's take a look at humanity. We see now at this time that humanity finds itself in a moldy fruit bowl. That the issue is not humanity, the issue is the context in which humanity finds itself in. This is really interesting. I really want you to consider this. This is one of the main pieces we want you to leave with, is the recognition the issue is not you or humanity. The issue is the context that you and humanity have been choosing. Because as soon as we as a humanity and as individuals choose a different context, we have the possibility of fulfilling our potential. Let's take a closer look at this. So what we have here on the screen are different types, different contexts. So as River said, it could be called domain, context, paradigm, all meaning the same thing. And over the years, we've come to see two main contexts. There's really thousands of different contexts. But let's just take a look at two so we can have a conversation. So the normal context or ordinary context that most people find themselves on the planet today is a context we are now calling denial, addiction, survival context. The reason we come with those terms is because that's the base of what's happening within that context. And I'm going to take a closer look. Another optional context that we find ourselves attracted to is more of an integral context or a holistic context that has more space for our wholeness. One of the problems with, and the key that I want to say here, is that neither one of these is right or wrong, and there's lots of different options, but the key piece is that it's a choice, and we have a choice. So let's take a look at denial, addiction, survival context for a moment. First thing I want to say about it, as one finds themselves in this context, which most people find themselves in, again, it's not right or wrong, it's their experience, is that in this context there is space and there is the experience of love. This is really important. However, love seems to be fleeting. It's either a few minutes, a few days, a couple of months, but very quickly love fades out and all of a sudden one's back into stress, overwhelm, challenge, and drama. And so it's important to know that there is space for love, but the foundational experiences that people experience in denial, addiction, survival context, and see if you recognize this for yourself or any of your friends or people you work with, is that there seems to be a lot of drama and struggle and the feeling of overwhelm and not enough, that there's a sense of basic lacking that people have in this context. And it's just a general feeling. And there's a toxic belief that most people have in this context, which goes like this: that's just the way it is. And that's part of what we're wanting to speak to you today and have you understand and remember. That is not the way it is. It is an option of the way it is. And so we also call this sometimes difficult world, this particular context. So we have had plenty of experience in this context in our earlier lives, and as we're in that experience, at one point we decide, we want to do something different, and this is part of the things we was talking about in terms of our research. What can we do different? And we found ourselves attracted to an integral context, which also would be holistic and include more aspects of ourselves. And some of the things that stand out about this context, in this context, one is breathing. That's where the deep breath lives. That's where one feels connected and is present, that there's this sense of connection. And that in this space, instead of denying and trying to get away from something, one instead turns towards it and embraces it. So it's more of a context of embracement, and then in that embracement, letting go, the ability to let go. Whereas within a denial context, how many of you were trained, taught, and encouraged to let go? And sometimes I remember when we first were learning about growth and awakening, people would say, all you need to do is let go. And I would go, that's a great idea, but how the heck do you do that?
Has anybody ever said that to you in moments of when you were
Just
really
let go. It's
upset?
like,
Well, just let go. And it was like, just let go.
Just let go. Let's see, how do I do that?
And I remember being really young in my teens and reading a spiritual book, and it was about like letting go. There was some statement about letting go, but nothing, of course, about letting go, about how to let go. And it was like I remember feeling so mad about that, that there wasn't anything about how to let go. And over the years, I definitely learned how to let go. Now I feel like, I always tell Diamond, I feel like I have a PhD in letting go.
Yeah, PhD
that I'm
in
so
letting
good
go.
at letting go.
Yeah.
And then there's also a point of where you let go, you start realizing in letting go, which seems like a scary word to a lot of people, I think, scary words, scary phrase, is that in letting go, there's incredible receiving.
Yeah, that's right.
There's incredible
So
beingness.
it's really let go and receive is how we language it at this point. Within an integral context, it's let go and receive.
Letting go and receive.
So in this letting go and receive, there's thriving, which is very different than for surviving. So yes, let us survive, but very quickly, the next phase is now let's lean into receiving what's available and what's possible, and let us thrive. And then in that space of thriving is love. And that what's foundational with an integral, holistic context is love. It's not something that's fleeting, that comes and goes. It's I am love. You are love. We are love. Love is foundational in our experience. And in this context and in this space is basic trust. Basic trust, life works. So we would call this easy world.
So one of the things that we recognized about it is that in any given moment it was a choice, and that we started realizing that when we would contract our energy, when we would start to contract and shut down our love, and you all know what that feels like. Okay, it's like you start feeling a little uptight or a little stressed or a little contracted back from your partner, and maybe you felt really copacetic and in a flow with them, and all of a sudden they say something and you feel yourself go, anybody ever had that experience? And you feel yourself start to contract on your experience. So when that happens, we have to realize that we're not punishing anybody else. It's like we're just withholding love from ourselves in that space. So we started retraining our neurology of how to not contract and instead stay open. And I started realizing that I was the love that I was looking for, because as a really ultra sensitive child, one of the things I remember myself thinking is, I want an all-loving reality. I want where everything feels like love. And I started realizing that the way for me to have that was to, first of all, recognize that I was the love that I was looking for. And secondly, is to not contract on it, and to not be willing to contract on it no matter what anybody else was doing, to be able to stay in that love. So I started retraining my nervous system to do that. But in order to do that, I also had to embrace my other feelings. I had to embrace all of myself. I couldn't selectively choose to keep the love open and to shut down on everything else, because you can't contract and control and try to control yourself and control your emotions and control your feelings and keep yourself totally radiant and open at the same time. So my embracement had to be big enough. My embracement had to be big enough to embrace all of me. and embrace every feeling that I had and everything that I was, and continue to explore it to where I started letting go of things that weren't actually me and started recognizing, but I only could recognize that of what wasn't me by exploring and inquiring into myself with a loving, embracing feeling towards myself, of really caring about myself and being willing to go, oh, wow, I just felt you have that reaction. What's that? And be able to breathe into those feelings and let feelings circulate and not be so afraid of my own feelings. I felt like we were really trained in lots of ways to be afraid of our own emotional states, especially if they weren't what the rest of our family expected or what was okay in our families to feel.
Well, it's all based within denial, addiction, survival context. One of the foundational denials is don't feel what you feel or see what you see or think what you think. You should stay in a smaller package and deny yourself, and the end result of long-term denial then leads to addiction and then an ongoing survival state. And so what happens is it almost becomes a trance because one feels like that's the way it is. That's what I'm speaking to earlier. And what we're suggesting, it is the way it is because it's been a continuum you've been in for many generations, you and your family. And that what we recognize, we want to invite you to recognize tonight, is that you do have a choice, that there are optional continuums, optional contexts, and that the context, if it's possible, to domain shift, to shift from denial, addiction, survival context into an integral, holistic context, then we can move our experience into a whole different experience. And so the answer that our research over the last 40 years has given us the skill sets and the information to be able to make a transition, but not only a transition, a sustained transition into an integral context where we can fully step into our potential and receive the love that we are and what's possible in our dreaming. Most people when they're having dreams are told, well, that's not possible. And what's interesting, it all depends where you're standing on the map. When I talk about standing on a map, I mean, if you're standing in denial, addiction, survival context, that's a certain place on the map. And when you're standing on that place in the map, dreams don't come true, and life is hard, and
there's just a lot of disappointments.
There's disappointment, the ongoing belief systems and stories that I can tell you over and over again and point out and prove to you because, see, others are having that experience. That's all true for when you stand at that place in the map.
You know, there's a saying of whether you're wrong or right.
Yeah, whether you're wrong, you're right.
You know, it's like either one, you're right.
Whether you're right, you're right, yeah.
Because it's like as long as that's your perceptual field, as long as that's your belief system, as long as that's how you hold your energy, as long as that's what you expect, that is what you experience, that we're perceivers. We're really intense perceivers as humans, and we tend to select and distort and provoke whatever we believe to be true, especially if we have a lot of emotional energy invested in that belief system. So if we believe life is hard and we have a lot of emotions stored from hard experiences that tell us that's what's true, we will tend to continue to select and distort and provoke those experiences and all of our experience to continue to believe life is hard. So there's a lot of patterns for a lot of us, and some of us think that's just the way we are, whatever it is. That rather our reactivity, rather our limitations, how we've thought about ourselves, the self-images that we've had, that they also become neurological patterning, and that's part of why we will tend to select and distort and provoke whatever we believe to be true and whatever our neurological patternings are. But Diamond and I have discovered that there's ways to completely rewire those neurological patternings relatively quickly. So we've worked with many students that in a year or two of working with the skills that we teach people can all of a sudden experience themselves very, very differently than they thought they were, much more expansive, much happier, much more creative, much more open than they ever knew they could be. And also, at the same time, experience new possibilities in their world changing and them being more effective in their effect with the world without going into control or contraction, but simply through their intention and through their willingness to be present in each situation, they start seeing new possibilities that they didn't even know existed before. And they start creating those new possibilities.
This is an example of standing in another place on the map. So if one's standing in the place on the map where it's integral and holistic, and you've opened up your belief systems, your agreement field, and your energy, then all of a sudden what's possible is a whole different possibility, and your perception of reality is different, and your experience of reality is different. But what one experiences with in an integral context is different than what one experiences in the denial, addiction, survival context. And again, the key is not, it's not right or wrong. However, in my experience, I have a really high preference at this point, and for many years, I'd much rather be in an integral experience than in denial, addiction, survival context. And if I find myself sliding back to a denial context, a place, I know exactly what to do to get myself back to a place of integral, connected, whole.
Within moments.
In moments. And tying that in, I like to tie that into our relationship. Our relationship does not exist in a denial, addiction, survival context. There's not agreement for our relationship. That's not where it lives. And so where our relationship lives is within an integral, holistic context. And if we ever find ourselves off or not having the connection that we're having, we're very clear that it's not a relational issue, that it turns out it's a context issue. And so we work on context first. This is a key thing I want you to leave with here tonight, is that it's context first. That is the key, because depending on what context you're in is going to affect your experience, your perception, and what's possible. Because if you're standing in denial and addiction context and you're trying to accomplish a relationship, a business, or whatever you're trying to do, what's available to you is entirely different than when you're standing in the context of integral and holistic.
And as you retrain yourself to stay open, to stay being the love that you are, to staying in relaxation, to staying in resolution and being resolution-oriented rather than problem-oriented, and as you start to make that contextual shift, you start creating new neurological pathways. And those neurological pathways also start getting deeper and deeper. We start creating new actually cells that respond to those new pathways and duplicate them. And that starts firing together also. Like we start having something that happened for me that way is the connection between love and power. And starting to recognize that power was only useful in total integration with love. Okay, and that being a loving person wasn't a weak position, it was a very powerful position to be able to stay in love.
However, at the same time, a lot of people who are loving people are afraid of power because of the belief systems within denial, addiction, survival context.
So as I let go of those,
Yeah.
I started having more and more
Integration.
unification of love and power within my own body, within my own belief system, within my own energy, and my own direct experience. And as that started happening, I felt my love was empowered and had more effect with other people as well as myself, and that my love was more powerful and my power was more loving. Okay, that it was more loving, and that when I used my effect, it had a loving effect. And so that was also firing together and wiring together. Okay, that was new neurological patterning that also becomes stronger and stronger as you do it. So the new context, as you ground yourself in it, as you establish yourself in it, and you live there, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger as well, to where now it's very difficult, and the only really painful thing to us is if we find ourselves really back in an old context. That's where Diamond and I go, oh, this is so uncomfortable. How do people live here? And we're very, within moments, we take ourselves back out of it. So at this point, we have big skills. We have like the craftsman toolbox on 3 sides of the garage kind of thing, where maybe a craftsperson will have this giant toolboxes, and whatever tool you need for doing something, they'll open the drawer and go, yeah, you've got this one and this one, They may have been doing wood carving for 40 years or whatever and have it. Diamond and I are that way around contextual shifting and around healing ourselves, helping other people heal themselves and make this contextual shift, and empowering themselves to let go of the old patternings that they need in order to be free. And to
Exactly.
really be at choice, to really experience living freedom, not freedom as a concept, but freedom as a bodily felt sense, moment by moment. Love as a bodily felt experience, moment by moment. A joy without denial, where we don't need to deny any of our feelings or anything that's really happening in order to have joy, that we can embrace everything that happens as part of the process and become wiser out of that process. Rather than more wounded, we can become wiser. Because you'll have two people who've had the same life experience, and one of them will somehow come out of that life experience like a war zone or something, and they'll come out of that experience wiser. And another person will go through the same experience and come out wounded. And so part of what we do is teach people how to digest and assimilate life without the contraction, so that the digestion and assimilation can happen all the
Right,
way
right.
through, and we can come into more and more empowerment, more and more wisdom, rather than more and more woundedness, and continue to let go of what we need to let go of that's no longer ours. And it's really similar to our digestion, where we take in food and we digest it and assimilate it. We take the nutrients
the
out of it,
nutrients.
that's really what we need, and we let go of what's no longer in service of our well-being.
Right.
And I think that we're meant to really be able to do that with all of life, but that a lot of people
This would
get,
be integral, by the way.
It's an
This is-
integral
See how this is
process.
more integral and holistic, whereas in denial, addiction, survival context, it's like, no, deny it, swallow it away, have the alcohol, have the sex addiction, get work preoccupied with work, avoid it. There's a whole different experience. When one's staying on the map in that place and making those kind of choices, then you end up with real experiences that goes, this is the way it is. And we're saying, I'd like to say it again, it's not the way it is.
It's an option.
It's an optional way it is, and it's being that way because it's a continuum that's been passed down for many generations that you've continued to choose, because up to now maybe you didn't have the awareness of it. And this is a decision River and I had to make, is what generation in our generation of continuance, as we look back with our grandparents and the parents before, what generation is going to hop off the continuum with denial, addiction, and survival and birth a new possibility? And we said clearly, I'm in. I'm choosing something different, and we've made that choice, and it's a significantly different experience, making that choice. And that's where you want to lead. I want to round up this piece of the context, is that it is a choice. And so what we call the work that we do in conjunction with this is living freedom. That living freedom, the 5-day experience that we're informing you about tonight, but the context that experience is called living freedom, where it's not just the idea of freedom, but it's living freedom, where you truly have choice to fulfill your potential, and you have a whole entirely different experience there.
No, I'd like to just say something about where we're at on the planet right now. We're at a really critical place on our planet, and I know all of you know that. Everybody in this room is educated enough to know that there's a tremendous amount of breakdown happening on the planet in every area possible, politically, environmentally, on an educational level, with healthcare. We could look anywhere, governments in the world. We can look anywhere, and there's just this tremendous amount of breakdown. But at the same time, there is a new context attempting to be born. And there are so many people all over the world, because we really keep our fingers on the pulse of this. There are people all over the world who are going, you know what? I don't want this anymore. I don't want this context anymore, and who are literally stepping into new contexts. Now, some of them are doing it in very specific areas, because not everybody can do everything. So it's great. Diamond and I have the 1,000-foot overview, but not everybody's meant to hold that. But I think that everybody needs to at least have it right now, because if you don't, you'll tend to feel
That's
overwhelmed, maybe a little depressed, maybe a little hopeless about the state of the world. Have any of you gone through that recently, of like, oh my gosh, what kind of world are our kids inheriting, or our grandchildren inheriting? What's going to
gonna happen?
There even going to be a world for our grandchildren? How is all the political unrest going to come through? What's got all the religious differences, everything that's
The
happening on
economics,
the
the market
economics,
crashing, on and on
you
and
know,
on,
what's
on.
happening on our planet. And I actually think that if you have this perspective, it helps a lot, is that there's an old context that's dying, and the old context needs to die. and we need to allow it to die while supporting beings in the least amount of suffering possible as that death happens. So that's part of why we feel so motivated to educate people so that there's the least amount of suffering in that death process. But if you identify with the old context, and if you only watch the media of the old context and the news reporters reporting the old context, it looks really, really bleak. And if you identify there, you're going to feel like maybe you're dying. Maybe something's happening to you that's really bad. You're going to feel depressed. You're going to feel hopeless. But if you realize, yeah, there's an old context dying that needs to die, that hasn't worked. There's some of the human experiment that has not worked. And that needs to die, and we can let it die while, like I said, supporting as much relieving of suffering as possible in the process, and mostly putting our energy to passionately creating a sane, functional, loving context for humanity and our planet. And as Diamond and I have traveled the world, we've worked in so many different cultures, religions, environments, socioeconomic situations. We have sat on the floor of mud huts with people, and we have been in mansions in Hollywood. We've done really full spectrum of working with people in corporate environments that were worth millions and millions of dollars per year, in very poverty-stricken neighborhoods. We've worked in so many different situations, and one thing that I've found out is that at the core, people are so good. And at their very essence, most everybody, no matter what religion they are or what culture they're from, wants basically the same thing. And I feel like if we create a new context that's based on those values, things like love, human connectedness, sanity, well-being, and health for everybody, a sane, respectful world to raise our children in, safety. It's like a lot of human beings want those same things. And if we create a new context that are based on those same things, and we commit to that with our whole being, and we start letting go of what's not like that in ourselves, what's not safe in us, for instance. If we want a safe world, what's unsafe in us? And start knowing, having dynamic skills and tools for healing our own non-safety, so that we are standing in a safe context and we become safety for other people. And not only ourselves, but for animals, for people, for plants. I feel like sometimes the whole world is running this relay race for me because it likes me because I like it. It's like when you love life with your whole being, life loves you. Mm-hmm. That's what starts to happen. So if we create a reality that's like that, a context that's like that, then from that context, there's room for incredible diversity. There's room for cultural differences and religious differences and all kinds of differences. In fact, a lot of differences are quite interesting in that place of full embracement of humanity, that the differences become interesting. They become creative. In fact, those differences can be used to innovate because some of us are innovators. Some of us are holders of the best and the healthiest of the old traditions that really did work. Some of us are artists, some of us are musicians, some of us are scientists, some of us are community people and community builders and relationship people. And what we do strongly is create great, healthy relationships. All those things can be done. But if you don't keep the overview of the contextual shift, you'll get bogged down and you'll start feeling like you're doing your little part without any support. But if you start understanding, wow, I'm part of a contextual shift. And I don't need to be proud of myself on a level of ego identification. I can be proud that I'm part of an evolutionary leap that humanity's taking and that we're taking on this planet. And it's not just humanity. It's like I could tell you 2 hours of stories about animals taking the leap. Okay, there's a lot of incredible growth happening, and there's so much good emerging and so much innovation happening and so many new things coming up in every area. And if we are living in a context without the competition and denial and addiction and survival, and we're thriving together, we're free to utilize each other's information. And you can be an expert in something, and you can be an expert in something, but all of us know that we're all working for this new
It's
context.
really a co-creation process.
And when we start being synergistic there, something very exciting happens. And I know that now I can accept that the old context is dying. I'm glad it is. It's like it needs to. There's been too much suffering on this planet. And I also know that I do all kinds of things to help alleviate the suffering as much as I can.
Including educating people and giving people information so that they can make a smooth transition out of a continuum in a context that they think it's the way it is.
And that's where we put most of our energy, is that new context, is building a new context. And so then we all of a sudden can get very excited. And if you identify with that new context, you start meeting people who are doing incredible things. We have a whole global network of people who are doing amazing things. So where you identify is very important in two ways, of what context you identify with, and if you identify as a builder of the new context, instead of feeling hopeless and depressed, you're going to feel most of the time very, very excited, very energized. And then the other one is your I am, where you identify with your I am. And I think there's nothing more important in our lives than we can do than to clarify our I ams. I remember a while ago I was working with an executive and he said, well, you know, I am the devil's advocate. And I said, is that what you want your legacy to be? Do you want us to put on your tombstone, he was the devil's advocate? Is like that really where you want to identify? Is there something else in you besides that you would rather identify with? And it was like such a revelation for him. He was like, whoa, I haven't ever thought about that. So we started talking. I said, wonder if you said, I'm an inspirer. Wonder if you said, I'm a liberator. Or wonder if you said, I'm a bringer of beauty. Or wonder if you said, I'm a beacon of truth. Or you said, I'm a, you know, it's like all these other things you could be. Instead of being a devil's advocate, why not be a beacon for the truth? Is that what you're really wanting to get to?
So what is your I am?
So what is your I
This is
am?
part of your homework, is to be listening over the next few days, next couple of weeks. What is your I am? In your head, I am, da-da-da. And then ask yourself the question, is that true? Number one. That's the first question, is that true? And secondly, is that where I want to go? Is that is that my path that I want to choose? I am? Because when you're saying I am and you're thinking I am, that's you with the gas pedal and the steering wheel taking you in that direction.
Yeah, it's powerful. So that's one of the things I really want to leave you with, is for you to examine your I am and to realize that in your I am, does it leave room for you to realize your potential and for why you came here? Because you came to this earth at this time for a reason, and each one of us has incredible things planted within us. And I feel like a lot of us feel that, and you may feel it as like a little dissatisfaction or a lot with your life. You may feel it as you're satisfied with your life, but you're feeling this draw. You're feeling a vision. Maybe a vision is coming to you, or your heart's opening in a new way that you didn't expect, or you're expecting, or you're all of a sudden experiencing a new kind of relationship or a new interest that you've never had before. But there's this feeling of wanting something bigger, wanting to grow into something bigger. And lots of people are being pulled to that right now, because that's what kind of time it is on our planet, is to step into our bigger selves and together to synergistically create a new context. And for our pride to go from an ego-based pride to a synergistic pride of that we are all part
Co-creating.
of this incredible divine dance, co-creating a new time on our planet together.
And ladies and gentlemen, there's skills, there's information, there's reference points that you need, that I needed, that we've researched over the last 40 years, that we've discovered, that has enabled us to have the experience and to pass the experience on to others. That if you're not in the moment being able to just to transition into new context other than a declaration of intention, it's okay, because it's number one, it's a process, and number two, you need information. That there's information that will make a huge difference in your experience.
There's reasons that we weren't given the information. There's been a lot of what I would call frequency control on this planet, of wanting masses to stay ignorant, especially to stay unempowered and unaware of their incredible divinity, power, and beauty of humanity and of themselves. There's been a tremendous amount of toxic shame that said something was wrong with us, and that we had to find out what it is and make ourselves better or different before we deserved to have lives that were easier or better, more loving. And one of the things I know after working with thousands of people for a long time is that there's nothing wrong with any of you, there's nothing wrong with any of us, that we're all incredible divine sparks, that we are cells within the body of God, and that we're here to wake up together and evolve what that is and allow the full potential of what that is to come on this planet now. Not in the future, but right now.
Exactly. And while that's true, and there might be choices that you are making and that you've continued to make that keep you in a spiral, downward spiral, or continue holding you in a denial, addiction, survival context. That's where you get to choose different choices. You get to breathe, you get to move, you get to make different choices. That is important that you change.
But it's a lot easier to do than most people think when you have the skills.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that we have. We have the reference point, like Diamond said, we have the skills, we have the tools, we have the experience, we have the knowledge. Then we want to pass it on to people. We want to empower people. The last thing we want is followers. We create leaders. We create
leaders.
Empowered people.
Co-creators.
We want empowered co-creators in our life.
Absolutely.
Because that's what's fun to us at this point, is to do that together.
And that's also, by the way, what's necessary for the birth of the next phase.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so just imagine 7 billion people standing up and saying, actually, we're creating a new context. And I am the new context, and I'm willing to let go of everything that has been about me that hasn't been that, and to claim who I authentically am that wants that, and to commit to that, and to have the process of healing I need to be able to step into my part. And I want help, and I'm willing to help others, and that's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine 7 billion people standing up and saying that. What would happen? What would happen?
And we could start with 25. We could start with 50, 100, 200,000. It isn't required that everyone has a yes.
And there's actually a think tank that's been following memes, cultural and social memes on planetary memes, and they're saying that there's now an incredible leap in how many people there are who are functioning at a different level of consciousness, and there's now about 3% of the people at an integral state of consciousness on the planet.
Yeah.
So, but it's growing exponentially now because there's a lot of those people are communicators and educators, and so there's a tremendous, amazing thing happening. And I think it's so incredibly exciting, and I'm inviting you personally to look at what is your part in it. And it's like, for different people, it's very different. And for somebody, it can be like the big da-da-da thing, of being somebody like the Facebook guy who just gave away most of his fortune. For somebody else, like a mother in Africa, it may be that she finds a way to get gardening equipment for everybody in her village and encourages everybody to have gardens in her village so that they can feed their children. Okay, and that's what her part in it is. There's so many different ways to play, but it doesn't matter because it's your part. It's like whatever is your part to do.
And what matters is contact first. It matters where you're standing, because if you're standing in denial, addiction, survival context,
it probably won't work.
There's not agreement for the possibility to occur, that you truly have to make that shift and make a commitment to integral, holistic, living freedom context. And as you do that, then then there's agreement for the new possibility to happen and all kinds of new possibilities to occur for you. For a lot of you, as a metaphor, for a lot of you already, in terms of your awakening, your transformation, your growth over the many years of your life and living, you have 1 foot on the shore, which has been old context, old continuity, and 1 foot on the boat, which is new possibility. And the boat has departed, and that can be quite uncomfortable, because what do I do now? And what is required now is you need to take the foot off the shore and put your feet on the boat and move into the birth of new possibility. That's the phase we're at. That's the invitation, and additional skill sets and information we're willing to share with you, but that's the choice, and that's the decision we each need to make at this time. Let me speak a little more about the 5-day event itself in terms of what we do there. And again, it's an integral, holistic experience, and so there is conversation, there's training, there's information, and the end result is you end up with a lot of great skills and reference points for how to create a sustained domain shift. That's why it's called a 5-day domain shift. However, within that, we also move, we dance, we breathe, we take naps, we have a really fun time. It's a very powerful
We have great
experience.
lunches.
It's very engaging, and our promise is as you come out the other side of that experience, you will not only be in a whole being awakening, but you'll be in a position to sustain that and expand it into your living and into your life.
The other thing people say is that we create a huge safe space, that we create a lot of safety for people, and we do. And it's not a confrontational event in any way. It's really very nurturing, it's educational, but at the same time it's very dynamic and multidimensional in that you do learn how to move in your body differently. You learn how to breathe, you learn all these skills, you use them. There's lecture times. We go in and out of all different kinds of experiences, and it's totally set up so that by the end of the time that you have the reference point in your body, not just a head idea,
No.
but in your body you have a reference point of the contextual shift in you and in your neurology.
Exactly.
And that's what people say over and over again. And so that's what happens, and it is skills that you will use way beyond that event. This is not an event that you will go and go, wow, that was a weekend high. We don't do it that way at all. That this is to ground you in the skills that you need for life.
I just had a phone call last night from someone who had done this work, and their mother had died yesterday. And he called and he said, I want to thank you and River and the work that you've done with me, because I know how to do this process. I am comfortable in this mourning process. I know how to do it. In the past, I probably would have done drugs, or I would have drank, or I would have done anything to avoid the pain. I don't need to avoid the pain. I can feel the pain. I can feel the love. I can feel this experience, and I can move, and I can connect with this person who died.
And I have the skills to take this all the way through
Thank you
and to mourn
so
successfully.
much.
And I know I can do this.
I can do this.
I don't feel overwhelmed.
And not only do I know I can do this, I am doing this. So,
And today his wife said he's doing amazing.
so we have many stories, but what we know is we continue doing this work and sharing this information because how much difference it made in our experience every day, and how much difference we've seen it make in thousands of people's lives over the last 40 years.
I want people to have the lives that they really can have. And sometimes you don't even know what that is until you start being yourself and loving yourself. And I'd like to just complete tonight with what I have to say, with saying that one of the most evolutionary, revolutionary things we could possibly do is to live a life of radical self-love.
Right. Breathing.
And so I'd like to invite each of you into the idea of what would your life be if you were practicing moment by moment radical self-love. And that through that, you were embracing you and your experience and your authenticity of who you really are so completely that you could also extend that kind of love and support to the rest of humanity, to your dog, to the plants in your yard, to the air that we breathe on our planet, to the systems that we use, to the governments we create. That what would happen? What would happen if we each did that and each took that responsibility? So I really invite you into thinking about the practice of radical self-love. So we're going to do just a few moments of a guided meditation. If you feel comfortable closing your eyes, do. This will be very enjoyable. And if you don't, leave them open. That's okay too, but relax and just take a deep breath, and we'll close tonight with just a few moments of being together. As we take long, deep breaths, we are relaxing our bodies and our shoulders, letting our faces become what they want to be, letting go of trying and efforting, of struggle, of holding any self-rejection or self-importance in place, and allowing ourselves just to be who we are in essence, together here in public, of embracing ourselves fully and deeply and profoundly. And as we breathe, we are letting go. And traveling within ourselves to the very heart of our being. Breathing into our hearts.
Breathing.
and allowing a sense of acceptance and love to filter through all our cells, our organs, our energy. Having a moment together of saying yes to the sacredness of all life, including ourselves. To light up from the inside out, of breathing into our bodies and feeling new possibilities coming alive of health and vitality and wellness. Rejuvenation and regeneration flowing through our bodies, through our energy fields. We are becoming radiant as we breathe long, deep, circular breaths. We are the new possibility. We are reality artists. We are innovators. Our life is a gift, and we are being filled with gratitude and vision and care for our lives, and for the essential being that we are, the essential, radiant, loving, beautiful being that is our core existence. Thank you.
So take a deep breath. Choose. Thank you.